All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone, and happy Cinco de Mayo. Thank you for joining us for another exciting installment of Startup Grind in New York City. This time with the founder who knows a thing or two about, well, founders, I guess. My name is Joshua Ness, and I'm the director here at Startup Grind New York City. I'm also a senior manager at Verizon 5G Labs, where I work with startups, academia, and enterprise teams to build a 5G-powered world. Startup Grind is the world's largest community of startups, founders, innovators, and creators, bringing like-minded and diverse individuals together to give startups everywhere the education, opportunities, and access they need to build, grow, and scale their companies. Being part of being on the Startup Grind team means having meaningful conversations like this that address certain aspects of building a company and how to deal with the grind that goes along with entrepreneurship. We also talk to experts about the advancement of technology, as well as exploring barriers to inclusion and how to create opportunities for representation and allyship in the community. So we are very happy that you are here to join us. Having said all that, I am also very excited to introduce John Lynn from Cela in New York City. John, how is it going today, my friend?
It's a lot. It's been a big week, and we've got some big updates coming up, actually. So a lot of preparation, a lot of deep work.
Are you going to be dropping any new like media PR bombs on us today?
Not yet.
All right. Well, it's good to have you here. As we kick things off, everyone in the audience, please make sure to drop your questions in the chat function. We'll be answering these throughout today's conversation. We will not be having a formal Q&A at the end. So if there's something that you want John to answer, just go ahead and drop that in the chat. Looks like we're already getting one or two things in there. Looks like everyone's all set. They can hear and see us just fine. We're going to get this show on the road. All right, John, to get started, tell us a little bit about what Cela is, because I have a couple of questions about your mission and about the way you describe it. But like, tell me real quick. I know I've described it as like an accelerator for accelerators, but like, am I on target with that? Is that really what
Yeah,
Cela
sure.
is?
Yeah. So Cela does two things that are really kind of unique in the ecosystem. One is that we build accelerators, which Techstars does and Dream It does and 500 Startups does and many other groups do. We only do it in partnership with other groups. So we are hired by existing accelerators for a fee or groups that want to build an accelerator to help them do that. And we come in behind them, make it successful. The other thing that we do, number two, is community between accelerators. And we do that through events, press, media opportunities, activations, and a network.
So like an opportunity for peer mentorship, is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. That's more where the accelerator for accelerators piece comes in, bringing together the managing directors, the program managers of all your favorite accelerator brands into one room.
Got it. Okay. So when you talk about Cela, I've heard you talk about, and I even think it's on your website, building durable innovation. What do you mean by that, and how is durable innovation different from some of the other just normal innovation that we might think about?
Yeah, appreciate that. So innovation is often seen as being ahead of the curve, being an iterator, a creator, an inventor. Certainly, invention is a part of innovation. The ability to do that consistently, resiliently, across environments, timeframes, conditions is durable innovation. For us, accelerators are the key to that because they enable you to be connected to the technologies, to the technologists, to the investors, to the operators that come together to make innovation happen. Having that network, by having that framework in an accelerator, you have resilient access to the ingredients of innovation across your challenges.
And is there an element of like ongoing support that goes along with that? Because like I imagine that as long as an organization is a member of Cela, they'll have access to ongoing resources almost into perpetuity. So is there a longevity element to that as well?
Yeah. To the extent that an accelerator enables resilience, innovation in a community over time, it's because the program creates a place and a role for everyone to play. So your community is changing, your company is changing. You've got people coming in, coming out, technology is rising and falling, capital trending and dissipating. As those contacts come and go, the accelerator is where the new ones will come in and find their place in your ecosystem. It's how you'll find out about the next blockchain or the next AI or the next incredible innovation. So that framework is the longevity of your reach into, from our perspective.
Right, and then by that very nature, then has a durability that is built into it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. How did you get this idea? How did Cela even get started? Like, I know you from back when, like John and I have known each other for going on almost 10 years now. And when I knew him, he was actually part of an accelerator for people, helping to accelerate them into new startup careers. And I think we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But like, where did you get the idea for Cela, and like, how did you get off the ground?
Yeah. So Cela started as two different companies. One for-profit, the service of building an accelerator. At that point, it was called Studio Project. The second was a nonprofit that was seeking to be its own association of accelerator professionals. And we learned a lot in setting up. My original co-founders and I set up both of those activities. We learned a lot about what it takes to convince a group to build an accelerator, the process and resources you need, not just to build an accelerator, but to collaborate with a larger organization, and then to do so and sell that consistently. And then on the nonprofit side, we learned about sponsorships. We learned about setting up events. We learned about creating a community. Many of the things that I'm sure Startup Grind has taught you. But those original entities didn't work out for a number of different reasons. And so in 2018, I was kind of back at square one. My original partners on both projects were gone. And the question was, if we keep going, why? Why do this again? Is there an opportunity? And if there is, what do we do differently to be successful? And that's where Cela began. Because we said, yes, confirmed, believe there is an opportunity, believe that accelerators are going to be an important part of how communities everywhere, not just corporates, not just governments, not just investors, communities in rural areas, in suburban areas, online communities grow in the future. So there's an opportunity, and they're going to be more important. Number two question, what do we do differently this time? The answer to that was to have a strong brand and a strong message. And so the first thing that we did was go through, hire a branding team who was a friend, and do a 4-day, almost 30-hour workshop to see if we could come up with a compelling brand that was unique in this space, because there are a lot of accelerators, there are a lot of communities, and a lot of individuals just looking for attention from accelerator professionals. So if those are the people we're going to try to serve, if that's the community we're going to try to build, we need to be able to do so in a really attention-grabbing, trustworthy way. And so we did this whole 30-hour workshop and got the team that we hired got us to the word quasar. So we were going to be called Quasar. And I didn't think that was compelling. So everybody was a little upset. We were in the whiteboard room, and the word accelerator was on the whiteboard. And I went up and I just circled the word Cela, the of accelerator, and everybody kind of slapped their own forehead and said, "Wow, that's it." So that was the beginning, and then the next challenge was to actually bring that out and get the buy-in of the world's top accelerators. We weren't going to do that by telling them we could teach them to do what they do better. Not a single one of them was ready to hear that. Some of them still aren't. But what we could do was create a really compelling media opportunity for them through a conference. An industry conference for the accelerator world had never been done. We had piloted a conference the year before. It got noted on the NASDAQ. Forbes approached us. TechCrunch got involved. Fast Company, Inc. magazine. And so we decided to lead with the next summit and launch the brand around it. Google came in to sponsor. This is now 2019. And accelerators from all over the world flew in to speak, to participate, and it did what we needed to do. So since then, the pandemic hit soon after. Our community activity went online, but also became much less profitable. So we started moving more towards the service side, more towards working with accelerators. And that's where we've really begun to grow recently. We've taken on, and these are some of the updates I mentioned, we've taken on some large contracts with government groups and corporations and some of the top accelerator brands, in a way that means we're growing the team, that we're going to be building more faster, and that it's kind of a new phase for us now. So
nice. Yeah.
Long answer.
No, that's perfect. I know we're gonna touch on some of this what's next stuff, especially lessons learned from the pandemic in a little bit. So I want to make sure we leave some time for that to hear more about how that value proposition might have changed or evolved. And I'm curious because you've participated in so many different types of accelerators, looking at your background, everything from Techstars to that program I meant to accelerate people into new careers themselves. How does your experience in all of these different types of accelerator formats and platforms, how do you feel that helped you prepare to develop what would become Cela? Like, did you pulled elements from all of those experiences into one?
That's a great question, because that also brings us to kind of the core mission of Cela, which is this framework doesn't have to be about startups necessarily. It can be for individuals. It can be for the arts, for sciences, for political life, many different things. So the referring to is called Startup Institute. And it was technically a boot camp, but it really ran under an accelerator model. And prior to that, I had been a participant as a founder in accelerators. I got my first term sheet from one of the first accelerators in the space back in, worked at Techstars, and then led the program at Startup Institute. And so what we've seen is that there's three critical elements that make an accelerator work, but that also founders should be looking for when they engage with an accelerator and discover, is this really a robust program? Because there's so many now. And those three elements are that there is a cohort, that there is an experience-based curriculum, and that there is a mentor network, a community behind it. A cohort is different than a class. In a cohort, you're going through every piece of the experience together. And the value of that is that you come out, and during that experience, you come out with 9, 10 other companies fully informed about what you are working on, what your challenges are, and what you need. So that's another, even if it's just one other, 5 other founders, 100 pairs of eyes that are out there with their care out for you. So that's the importance of a cohort. The curriculum is not just content. It's based on your company. You have to already be working on something. So if you're looking at a program that says, hey, we have the best content on how to fundraise, that's where is it coming from? How is it being adjusted to work with my fundraising scenario and objectives? If that process isn't there, then it's not a true curriculum. And then the third is the connection piece. Is this program going to put me in front of the individuals and organizations I need to write me a check as an investor, as a founder? It's going to help me find my co-founders. Is it going to help me with media and press opportunities? What are the specific things it's going to connect me with? Because the education is great, but it needs that real opportunity too. So those are the things that we see being, and let me know if this is Josh, those are the 3 things that we see being crucial for these programs to work across settings and across the past 10 years. There's different ways that those things may come together in the next phase to continue making accelerators as impactful. But those are the 3 things I generally recommend founders look for.
Got it. No, that's incredible, and that it's so neat that you boiled it down to these 3 elements that need to be in place in some form or fashion. Maybe not always operating under the same in the same format, but knowing that there needs to be this element of peer mentorship, of experiential learning, as well as active and engaged mentorship. Is in knowing that those are the building blocks. That's the base layer, and then just being able to build on top of that with respect to things like format and outcomes and whatnot. It's really great that you've been able to succinctly describe the requirements like that. What was your first hurdle in getting it off the ground? Like you mentioned briefly this pilot summit, which based on my math was probably 2018. What was the initial reaction by program operators or by partners? Like what did people think when you first told them about this thing that they knew about? Everyone knew what accelerators were, especially your audience, but you're approaching it in a different way and offering up a slightly different value proposition. What was the reaction, and was there any pushback?
Yeah. So a lot of the hard work had been done because I'd been active in the accelerator space for a few years. I'd delivered a 7-figure check for the Techstars Venture Fund. I'd worked with many different startups in accelerators, and so knew a lot of these different programs. So when I went knocking on their doors saying, we're going to make a real go of this, they didn't really understand, but they said, if you give me a time and a place, I'll be there, and I'll show my face for as long as you want me to. I'm not going to pretend like I know or understand where you're going with this. So their openness was there. And remember, each of these accelerators runs their own community and their own network. So they understand the importance of doing that. It's actually a pretty good audience from a customer development point of view for that reason. The real obstacle was me. And what I mean by that is it wasn't my first company. This was, by 2019, this is my 5th company. I understood the process of establishing a company as one where you work really hard at the expense of your health and relationships and future, and you do it in an intense and focused way and hope that things work out if you try hard enough, long enough, at the right time. And that is totally untrue. I think that's part of a founder narrative that a lot of people associate with the founder journey that really is a disservice to anybody thinking about entrepreneurship. The important thing that you need to do is actually realize that your company in its earliest stages is a reflection of you or you and your co-founders. The way it communicates, the way it relates to its market, the way it grows, all comes from you and whoever you're working with to build it out. So if you're not in a healthy place, neither will your company be. Was able to make the company work. So remember, we founded in early 2019, had the summit mid 2019. By the end of the first year, the pandemic was beginning. And, we had a sort of bread and butter roster of clients that immediately, almost half of them dropped off. And within 2 months, was trying to ask the SBA for a loan, was trying to ask friends and family for loans, and it would never plan to raise, but had created this strong brand, and both for Cela and myself, we'd been featured on Forbes and these other platforms, so we had credibility. And one of the mentors in the network I built at Startup Institute had sold his company in the 5 years since I'd left. He approached for saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in New York. This is February 2020. Do you want to catch up?" We caught up. And at the end of that month, he wrote me a $100,000 check to be our first investor, and really enabled the company to proceed into the pandemic era. So there's more there, what happens at that point. But to answer your question, had it not been for that timing and I want to call it luck, then the biggest blocker up to that point was me and my ability to really understand that that if you're not taking care of yourself, then your company is going to go the same direction.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice that a lot of founders overlook. I think not only the making sure that as founders we're in the right headspace and health space to bring our very best selves to our company so that it can present its best self, but also the value of building.
I wish I said it that way.
You can use that if you want to. I'll license it to you. But the value of community and the value of that network and the value of being kind and building and maintaining relationships, because you never know which one you might be their next investor, or they might be your next investor, or you might appear in order to help each other out at some point in time. I think those are really important lessons to learn.
I think there's a really important point there as well. I just want to call out quickly is you're not always perceived in the way that you feel you exist. And sometimes, especially when you feel like your company's not going well, you're screwing up, it's going the wrong direction. Others can take a look at what's going on and really see a lot of great things, or vice versa. So you've got to be ready to wrestle with that kind of mind game.
Yeah. No one likes to think that they are awesome and then hear that, oh, by the way, you should change everything. So talking about the idea of you helping out other accelerators, going back to I guess the other part of it, the studio project part of it, because I have been a recipient of some of that work that you did at Verizon. When I first joined at 5G Labs, I was managing a skunkworks development team called the Concept Studio that you and your company at Studio Project helped to create. And it essentially was a product accelerator, not a company accelerator or a human accelerator. It was a product accelerator. And lots of different organizations have tried to operate various kinds of accelerators, from corporations to venture capitalists to educational institutions even do this, and as well as public sector and government entities. So what are some common areas where you've noticed that they seem to get tripped up and need help getting across the finish line? Like what are the more common problems or the more common issues that come across your desk?
That is my favorite question. And it's a great one because there's a very strong answer, single clear answer here. And it's the mentor network. A lot of accelerators or accelerator-like frameworks are run by individuals that are investors or exited founders or have a strong network behind them all. And the feeling can often be, I know all the right people. I've got the Rolodex. I can run an accelerator. And it's not true. The operative force behind a successful mentor network is not your Rolodex. It's not how many people you know. It's not that your Rolodex is filled with high-profile individuals like a Seth Godin or Elon Musk or any of this. Is having a mentor network that is aligned to deliver for very specific things for your founders or for your participants. So regardless of whether you're going to a VC at Andreessen Horowitz managing $16 billion or a friend that you think could be helpful for the commitment you're asking that mentor to make is to show up to certain events, to meet with a certain amount of founders, and to make connections for them. Or whatever it is you believe that those mentors should be doing. But there needs to be clear alignment on what they're delivering for the founders. And if that is in place, you can kind of get the rest of it wrong. You can have a curriculum that isn't focused enough. You can, maybe have a cohort that doesn't have the right balance between founders. But if you have the right support network set up in the right way, magic will still happen.
You're making me rethink the commitment that I make as a mentor to a variety of different accelerators. I didn't realize that I was that important. I'm gonna have to go make some phone calls. Do you have the question that we're overwhelmingly getting in the chat is, do you have Elon Musk in your Rolodex?
SpaceX is in there. I don't know if we want to include Elon yet.
Well, we'll call it like a second degree connection.
Yeah, sure.
There you go. Flat out, John, who is your competition?
So because we only operate in partnership with other groups, we can come in behind any other brand. So when it comes to services, straight up services, we're selling to the industry. Most new entrants in this space are competing with those accelerators for their own contracts. We are basically like a subcontractor for many of the accelerators. Some of the founders in this call may have been. Now on the community side, there are a couple of other organizations. Global Accelerator Network is the OG. They were the first kind of pure membership, paid membership for accelerator leaders, and still doing great things today. They focus more on being a venture fund themselves and supporting the alumni networks of accelerators through their fund. And so there's ways even they are kind of parallel to us, and they speak at our summit. They give the keynote on the state of the space. So it's a, what is the co-opetition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are both with and of the ecosystem. providing value across the board and inviting value wherever you find it. Seems very magnanimous of you.
The value proposition unique.
Yeah, no, it's unique and flexible and scalable. I like that. You have said, and I've heard you talk about this before, that your ultimate hope is for accelerator frameworks to be applied outside of startup communities into things like the arts and sciences and political life and even beyond that. How do you think that's possible? And how is Cela moving that goal forward?
Yeah. So our strongest progress in that piece of our mission is in the arts. And we are currently supporting 3 accelerators that do what accelerators do for founders for emerging creatives. One is just for writers, one is for emerging musicians, and one is for film and stage productions. The one for writers is called the Writers Incubator, INK. Isn't that cute? Incubator. There's World United Artists, and then the Midnight Oil Collective, which is the film writer. And they're all kind of seeing there is a really bad deal in place for creators. If you are a musician and you're on Spotify, only the top, I think, 0.1% of artists on Spotify make more than $50,000 a year. There's only 10,000 that make $50,000 or more a year in all Spotify.
Wow.
When it comes to film productions, very similar kind of spread. You're getting 80% of the revenue is going to the studios and the production houses. 15%, maybe 20% is going to the creative team, and then they're also getting the costs for marketing, things that really should be on the other foot. So the reason that the accelerator model is able to move towards solving these problems is because it's creating access for the participants. I'm glad to hear that, Scott. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? The accelerator is creating a network of other creatives, executives, publishers, studios that can help the creatives get past the hierarchies in place, in the same way that an accelerator for startups helps those startups get to venture capitalists who are essentially in a publisher position. The other thing that they do is that they earn leverage for those creatives because they're creating a deal flow for the studios and the publishers. Because the accelerator is saying, hey, we've got this pipeline, we're doing this hard work that you need somebody else to be doing. We're gonna broker a new deal, and these percentages are gonna be different. And if you want to work with us, if you want access to these projects, here's the contract you signed to be part of that arrangement. In political life, there are similar aspects of how campaigns work that are broken. And I won't go into those here, but that same leverage can be built by creating a platform that enables many more individuals to be candidates, and that helps those candidates access funding, support platforms that might take them the better access the Washington way. So without going too deep into any of those models, that's kind of how we're seeing the accelerator model create opportunity for disruption in other industries.
That's interesting. And I like the way that you are approaching that, especially talking about the creatives and the artist side, and with what Scott in the chat was talking about, in the audience, talking about him being a studio and network filmmaker and a software founder, the value in being able to jump past the gatekeepers. And correct me if I'm wrong, it almost sounds like as part of this accelerator, you're almost acting as a quasi-representative for some of these creatives and giving them the templates and actually even presenting the templates to those gatekeepers and managing that, whether it's a negotiation or whether it's a connection, managing that for them. Is that a kind of service that you're talking about for these creatives?
You're not an agent. You're not fulfilling an agent function or a representative function quite, because you're not selling the publisher. What you are doing is creating leverage on behalf of the creative to sell to the publisher. So you're saying, hey, publisher, I'm not going to have the meeting with you. I'm not giving you the pitch, but you know that the deal flow that we have, the community of creatives or the community of startups, if it's a VC, that we've put together is one that you want access to. And because you have that trust in our community, you're going to approach it in a different way. So it's almost like you're saying, Josh, like a representative function, but not quite to the extent of making the sale for the participant.
Mm-hmm. Is this something that can either sit on top of or even underpin an existing fellowship program? I'm part of an arts organization that we have artist fellows that we bring in, and we provide them things like space and some funding, as well as access to other types of whether it's a peer network or whether it's an advisor network, which I think a lot of fellowships probably do. Like, is this something that can complement something like that?
Part of the reason that we think accelerators are a missing piece in so many different settings, right? So in that situation, you've got a really well-established support network of individuals and resources. What the accelerator can do is create a framework that makes them accessible so that people can more easily engage with the support and benefit from it, and the fellowship can be impactful for them. More and more, the problem for everyone is one of curation. It's not necessarily that you don't have opportunities around you, it's that you don't know which one to invest your time and your attention into. Mm-hmm. So the accelerator can help curate that, as well for the participant.
That's interesting. I like that. I'll have to talk to you more about that offline.
Let's do it.
So I know that the way that you initially talked about this was with these summits and that bringing people together, like actually together, seems to be at the core of how Cela began its operations and provided value to its customers. How did the pandemic impact your value proposition? You touched on it briefly at the beginning about how you had to transition things, but what was that really like?
Yeah. You're exactly right. We were our revenue focused more on the community, the events, sponsorships that we were doing. And as soon as things went online, our costs went way down because we didn't have to get a venue or get F&B or any of that.
Yeah, the catering budget for a Zoom conference is close to zero.
Yeah. But where you lose a lot of that advantage is getting people to show up, and virtual experiences are sometimes more, that they have a different set of challenges attached to them. So we were able to transition our community online, but it was taking a lot more work for us to keep it functioning in the way it was. And so as we proceeded about a year into the pandemic, we were running out of our investment capital because we weren't able to command sponsorship anymore or at the same level. And so we started putting products on the block. Right? We had different offerings and we had different offerings in our events. And we said, okay, the biggest event that we do is our summit. Can we get a significant sponsor for doing that online? And we spent 4 weeks selling that sponsorship. It did not work. We killed it for 2020. We went to the next event. Okay, we have our office hours, which matches diverse accelerator leaders with diverse founders. that we've been doing since the kind of peak of the Me Too movement. Happy to talk more about that. Okay, this is solving a meaningful problem still, and there's growing support for it. So we were able to get a blue chip sponsor for that monthly event, and that got us past our cliff and into 2021. Now, what we started noticing in 2021 is that our community appreciated our activity and that sponsors benefited, but there was a totally untapped opportunity in pulling content out of our community activities and sharing it with our community in our newsletter. And as soon as we started saying, here's what was talked about in today's, in this month's event, here are the people that were, the individuals and the organizations that were there, we'd achieved an authority function in the space and started getting inbound contracts to help serve existing accelerators. And now that's mid 2021. And those, so it's not so long ago. And those about 9 months. And that pipeline has continued to grow and retain a lot of its sponsors and service contracts, and the price points have gone up because our bandwidth has been lower to serve them. So we'll have to say to an existing sponsor, we know that you sponsored this event last month. We cannot field that same structure again without an increase. Just because it wouldn't be fair to the current sponsor. And the same thing has happened with services. The takeaway there is content. Who knew can make a big difference. The second is who your customer is can make a big difference in what your revenue is. You might be offering the same product, but if you're selling one to a family office investment group and you're selling the other to a federal government group, one might be 6 figures, one might be 7, and the only difference is who you're talking to. So in between, so the takeaways are, don't be afraid to put products on the chopping block. They can come back later. Use content. Don't be shy of your own authority, and pay attention to who your customer is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Are there any, have you learned, the content, understanding the value of content, I think is great. And the way that you've been able to repurpose some of that crowdsourced content into something that the rest of the ecosystem or the rest of your community can take advantage of is a great example. Do you think these best practices will continue to be implemented now that we're starting to get together again, or does that dilute the value of attending an in-person event?
That is almost too good of a question. Let me think. I think there are ways, it has been shown that deals of all kinds, whether it's investment, enterprise sales, customer sales, can occur front to back online. So you can achieve outcomes for a founder in an accelerator through a totally virtual program, which in turn totally changes your costs for running a community under an accelerator banner. That will not go away. Accelerators are still commanding the same amount of equity stake in startups that go through them, even though they're virtual. They're still acquiring the same tuition fees for accelerators that take a tuition, or the same revenue cut for accelerators that take a piece of your revenue or a commission on sales that they help you with, which accelerators have these many different models now. That being said, the use case for in-person has become incredibly robust. And if you go to an in-person event, you can skip hours and weeks of follow-up, email, scheduling, because you're in person with somebody. So things can just get coordinated faster. The other big superpower we see in in-person events is collaboration, the ability to get a group to act together quickly. and it just doesn't happen in this. People's energy in the same room isn't there in other settings to get them to look around and say, oh wow, everybody else is going for this. I better stand up too. So that's what I think what's going to happen when we think in the future versus in-person events.
Yeah. Do you have plans to get together in person again soon? I know that
we are working hard on it. We want to do our summit again at the end of this year. We're hoping that we'll hear from a couple key partners soon. So that will be one of the big updates that you and Startup Grind will be one of the first to know about if it happens.
I would love that. I'd love to share that with our community. I think our community is also champing at the bit to get together again. I'll have a quick ask on that here at the end of the talk. So my last real question is about how the industry itself is evolving, and like to talk about accelerators as an industry, I think before this conversation would have felt a little foreign, right? Because you have the healthcare industry where you're providing products and services that help users, right? Or the manufacturing industry. But like the accelerator industry it seemed a little nebulous before you started really talking, but now I can see that there is structure to it, and there are outcomes to it, and there are best practices to it. And I knew that before, but like you've really helped to crystallize this. So my question is that we're seeing evolution in the industry now, things like hyper accelerators that instead of 6 months or a year of a program, we're seeing much more focused, much more rapid programs that are devoted to one singular goal, right? And with an accelerator, I think the end result is usually a pitch to investors for the purposes of getting investor dollars. But we know that there's so much more value that goes into it, which you have been able to describe here for us today. And with these hyper accelerators, with the exclusive North Star focus being investment dollars, I feel like there's this sacrifice of that peer network and really getting to know each other through the slog of building the business, of that experiential curricula, and being able to process and internalize that, as well as being able to spend time with mentors and to experience what that evolution and that growth would look like in developing those relationships. Because these types of hyper accelerators are focused exclusively on raising money now, right? And so, but we're in an environment right now where there's so many investment dollars chasing tech companies. If somebody just has the word Web3 or NFTs or metaverse in their company summary, they're going to get a seed round check. And so I'm curious if you have seen or you are thinking about anything like new formats or outcomes for accelerators that might be applied across either your client portfolio or across the industry. With the hyper accelerators, that's one, but I'm curious. I don't know that I'm sold on that concept. And so I'm curious what you think. A, what do you think about that idea of hyper accelerators? And B, is that the natural evolution, or do you think that the industry can evolve in a different way?
That's such a great question. The example of hyper accelerators and how the industry is changing is an important one, because it asks the question, value over time. And if you have to choose between one, which is the better investment for a founder? We'll come back to that in a second. From a historical point of view, I think it's important to mention in 2007, there were 3 accelerators in the world: Techstars, Y Combinator, and Numa. By 2012, by 2009, there were about 12. And then by 2013, 500. 2 years later, 2015, there were close to 10,000. And we anticipate there's something between 10,000 and 20 active accelerators in the world right now. So the growth, especially within the pandemic, has been exponential. We have several RSS found different versions of accelerators, and every day a new one is being announced. Every day. So there's a lot to take advantage of here, but there's also a lot that's changing. So in the case of a hyper accelerator, when we're saying, okay, if we have less time but more focus, what wins out? The answer is really, from a founder's point, if I'm advising a founder, you should be laser focused on the outcome and the method that the accelerator, however long it is going to deliver for you. And if you're not clear on the one thing they're going to help you with and how they're going to do that, don't do the program. Mm. So for a hyper accelerator, sure, we can try to do less and in a smaller amount of time, but that's really what we should be focusing on anyway. And the best programs do that already.
Okay. On that note, there's an element of there are a couple of questions that that you and I talked about addressing. Based on all of this information, which is a lot, I'm going to have to watch this again just to absorb it all. You've talked about, as a founder, like something you just like drove home, is how to optimize outcomes. When does a company want to do an accelerator, and how do they choose which one to go for?
Yeah, the best time to do an accelerator is when you know what you need. And if that's your first check from an investor, if that's your co-founder, if that's a press opportunity, if that's a customer, that's an indication that you should start searching, and that there is a program out there ready to meet you where you're at. The exchange is, are you going to be able to find that program in time? Do you have the energy, effort, and ability to conduct that search? And this is a general problem for founders right now, even outside of accelerators, right? We talked about curation before. If you are if you're a CTO for a startup and you're trying to find hosting, you can get free perks from Amazon, DigitalOcean, Google Cloud, you name it, and a dozen other groups that you probably haven't even heard of yet. Banks are willing to give you all sorts of different discounts on opening your account with them that they'll promise even before you have an incorporation document. Mm-hmm. Goes on and on. So in the same way, you need to be thoughtful and do your research when finding these programs, but it can also be a blocker. So if you don't find that program, stay committed to your outcomes. One of the things we hope to fix in the future is this connection function, because there are so many accelerators that are great, that are looking for founders, and there's so many founders that are open to getting that support. And it's just tragic that they're not finding each other on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm.
And I think you have you mentioned your things like office hours as a way to kind of make those matches. And I think I want to close with that, John. This has been an incredible dialogue. I learned a lot about you and the work that you're doing that I didn't know before, and I've known you for, like I said, almost a decade. I want to say thank you for joining us here today, and thank you to the audience for joining in as well. John, where can I and the audience go to learn more about these office hours and to get involved with Cela?
Yeah, so we are recruiting for our next office hours now. It is focused on health startups. So you can apply there. You can also apply even if you're not a health startup, and you will get into our application database and be reached out to for the next open office hours. But this is really the best touch point for founders with Cela.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And for anyone who's in the audience, John put the link in the general chat. You can go to celainnovation.com and you can find there the applications to join their May office hours, as well as you can continue returning there. Also sign up for their newsletter. and get information about upcoming office hours and things like that. That is awesome. Thank you, John. That's incredible. This conversation has been recorded and it'll be available in the next few days on the event page where you registered. And we'll be back next month with more great stories from the entrepreneurship community. So be on the lookout for an announcement coming soon. Also, May is SG Women's Month here at Startup Grind. The headquarters chapter will be hosting an SG Women's Summit on topics like fundraising, leadership, and the future of the web on May 18th. So check the chat box for a link or scroll down on the homepage at startupgrind.com. I am realizing now that I didn't have that link for the chat box. Give me 2 shakes and I will have that in there. Actually, it's right up front at, oh wait, I found it. This is when planning goes awry. The link is in the chat box there. But yeah, startupgrind.com. You can scroll down and you'll see the information for the SG Women's Summit. Lastly, you can find out more about our events and some of our previous interviews on startupgrind.com and searching for the NYC chapter or following this other link that I've pasted in the chat, startupgrind.com/new-york. We are also thinking about how to bring the community back together in person. If you have or know of a space where the Startup Grind community can begin meeting in person again, please let us know. You can email me directly at josh@startupgrind.com. We historically have met in places like offices that have big event spaces. That's been our usual go-to, but we're not opposed to looking at other formats and things like that. So we would love to bring folks together again in person, and we can't wait to do so. Thank you so much, everyone. John, any parting words for us here today?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's really, an honor, and thank you for being the heartbeat of the Startup Grind community and keeping the banner waving through the pandemic. Just thrilled to be a supporter here.
And likewise, John, any way that Startup Grind and our network here can be of help to Cela, please do let us know. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great night.